Today, we are going to talk about a powerful shift in thinking. One that could totally change how you learn, how you execute, and ultimately how you get things done. It's called just-in-time learning, and it might just be the key to unlocking your productivity.
You know the feeling, right? It's late. Your screen is just a complete sea of open tabs. Guides, tutorials, articles, all of them promising some kind of secret knowledge. You've spent hours learning, but then you look over at your actual project and nothing. Nothing's been built. It's that awful feeling of being completely swamped with information, but having absolutely zero to show for it.
Oof, this quote, it really hits hard because, well, it's true, isn't it? Learning something without putting it to use right away isn't really learning. It's just passive consumption. It's basically entertainment that's just disguised as productivity. And that information, it just vanishes because your brain has no real practical reason to hang on to it. And this leads us straight into what you could call the curse of inaction. It's this vicious cycle where we just stockpile knowledge, just in case we might need it someday. We end up turning ourselves into these professional students who are amazing at preparing, but never actually get into the race.
This right here, this is the tutorial trap. And it's a really comfortable place to hang out, because watching a video or reading an article feels like you're making progress. But it's an illusion. You're just simulating work to avoid the real and, often uncomfortable, friction of actually doing the work. This leads to the state of cognitive bloat, where your mind is totally full, but your output is completely empty.
So, how do we break free from this? We do it by adopting a totally new way of thinking. We have to shift from being information hoarders to becoming strategic, almost surgical in our actions. And this is exactly where just-in-time learning comes into play. Just-in-time learning, or JIT for short, is exactly what it sounds like. It is not about learning everything there is to know about a subject right up front. Nope. It's about finding the one precise piece of information you need right at the moment you need it to solve an immediate problem and keep moving forward. Think of it as a performance optimizer. And when you put the two models side by side like this, the difference is just staggering. Traditional just-in-case learning, that's driven by general curiosity, but the risk is huge. Massive information overload. And because you're not using any of it, your retention is terrible. JIT, on the other hand, is all about immediate need. Your retention is incredibly high because you apply it instantly. Now, it does have a risk, fragmented knowledge, and we'll get to that, but for actually acquiring skills and solving problems, it's just unbeatable. All right, so we've talked about the problem and we've talked about the solution. Now for the really good part, the playbook. Let's break down exactly how you can put this to work in your own life to start getting real results. The whole system is built on this one guiding principle, minimum viable knowledge, or MVK. This is all about being absolutely ruthless with your focus. You have to let go of that old mindset that says you have to master the fundamentals before you can even begin. Instead, you hunt for the smallest possible piece of information, that 20%, that will solve 80% of whatever problem is right in front of you. Clarity always beats completeness here. And this tactical loop shows you how it's done. First, you define an anchor project. Don't just say, I want to learn Python. No, decide to build a budget tracker with Python. See? Now that project dictates exactly what you need to learn. Second, you find your MVK. This is where the stop rule is so critical. The second you find the answer that lets you take that next step, you stop reading and you start doing. Third, apply it right now. And finally, you archive that solution. And trust me, that last step is so important because it makes sure you never have to solve the same problem twice. I want you to remember this number, 24. This is the execution rule. If you don't apply something you've learned within 24 hours, it is lost capital. Your brain has already marked it for deletion. It's not learning anymore, it's just entertainment. This rule forces you to stay in action mode. So, how do you do that archiving thing effectively? You build what you might call a JIT vault or a second brain in a tool like Notion or Obsidian. The key is to create what are called future you to read notes. The trick is to write them as if your future self has total amnesia. Explain the problem and the solution in super plain English. Capture the aha moment, the source, maybe even a video timestamp, and tag it by context, not just topic. This turns a one-time fix into a permanent searchable asset for yourself. Now, let's be real. JIT learning is not a silver bullet. It does have some potential downsides, and you have to be aware of them to use it the right way. It's all about being strategic, not just constantly reacting.
So, if you misuse JIT, you can fall into two pretty big traps. The first is what we call cognitive fragmentation. This is where you know how to fix 10 different bugs in your code, but you have no idea how the underlying system actually works. You end up with all this shallow, disconnected knowledge. The second danger is that you just fall right back into tutorial hell, where you're just reactively Googling answers all day and calling it productivity. But the good news is you can put some safeguards in place to prevent that. For example, try batching similar learning tasks together. You can also use a really strict 15-minute timer for your searches to stop yourself from falling down some random rabbit hole. It's also about practicing selective ignorance, intentionally ignoring stuff that isn't relevant to your immediate problem. And remember, when you're in a JIT session, you focus on the how, not the deep theoretical why. You can save that for later.
I love this way of thinking about it. JIT learning is your tactical first aid kit. It's for patching up an immediate problem to get you back up and moving again. But it is not a substitute for the deep, foundational knowledge that makes up your long-term professional health. And that's the real key here. We have to integrate this incredibly powerful tactic into a much bigger, more strategic vision for our own growth. It's about combining that tactical speed with real strategic depth. Because if you only rely on JIT, you end up in the state of reaction-based living. You know, you're always busy, always putting out fires, but you never actually build anything deep or lasting. To build real expertise, real authority, you need a dual-track system that balances both sides. And here's what that balance looks like in practice. Think of it as a 70-30 split. 70% of your learning time should be dedicated to that deep, strategic study, reading the big books, learning the foundational theories, building your long-term intellectual architecture. The other 30%, that's for surgical, just-in-time learning, used only to unblock those immediate bottlenecks that are stopping your projects. So I'll leave you with this question. Think about that one project. You know the one you've been researching for weeks, maybe even months. What would happen if you just drew a line in the sand right now, applied that stop rule, and just started? What could you actually create today if you finally shifted from just in case to just in time?